Hello, Algebra 1. We are starting into Chapter 3. I know we did a part of Chapter 3 with absolute value equations, but in this section, we are focusing on just inequalities. So before we get into inequalities, you guys are probably familiar with seeing inequalities written like this, with the less than or the greater than or the less than or equal to or the greater than or equal to symbols. But what we're going to start talking about is what we call interval notation. So interval notation is another way of expressing the answer to an inequality. It uses parentheses and brackets to show where the graph starts and ends. Parentheses means not included or open. We use when a graph starts or ends on an open circle. So remember, an open circle is used when we have less than or greater than, when it doesn't have that or equal to. Now, brackets mean included or closed, and we use when a graph starts or ends on a closed circle. So again, just to kind of remind ourselves, if I can find a pen. So parentheses are with an open circle. Open circle always means less than or greater than. So whenever you see a less than or a greater than, you guys are going to be using parentheses in interval notation. Now with a bracket, it's a closed circle, and a closed circle is when it's less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. So essentially when it has that or equal to. So you will always use a bracket. Basically, when you see that extra line underneath it, that's when you use a bracket. So when something's going on forever in the positive direction or forever in the negative direction, we use infinity. We use the infinity symbol, which is like basically a sideways 8. Looks like that, or a negative infinity. And so we always use parentheses with infinity or negative infinity. And I'll show you in the next portion what that looks like. Okay, so let's look at x is a less than 3. Now we know, well, first, how do we say that? So when it's going in that opposite direction, it's x is less than 3. And so when it's going in the opposite direction, away from the x, and it doesn't have a line under it, it's an open circle. So when it's an open circle, when we graph that, now you can either graph it with an open circle or graph it with a parentheses. I'm just going to graph it using open circles. So you can put your 3 anywhere. And if it's less than, that means it's going in the negative direction. Now it's an open circle at 3 going in the negative direction. Now, what does an open circle actually mean? So when you have an open circle, basically what it's saying is 3 is not a solution, but every number less than 3 is. So 2.99, 2.999, 2.999999999. Like those are all values that are less than 3, and so those would be all considered solutions. So this is saying 3 is not a solution, but every number less than 3 is. Okay, so let's get into interval notation. The way that I usually look at it when I'm doing interval notation is I use my graph to help me. So it's going in the negative direction forever, which means it's going towards negative infinity. And then it's ending at 3. And when we write interval notation, we're always writing it from left to right. So we have negative infinity to 3. Now, negative infinity, remember we always use parentheses with infinity or negative infinity, so I'm going to use a parentheses. And then it's an open circle at 3, so I'm also going to use a parentheses there. And that's it. That's interval notation. So these two things, x is less than 3, and this, like the way that we wrote it like that, these are saying the same exact thing. It's just different ways of writing it. I do want you guys going forward to write it in interval notation. Okay, so x is greater than 3. Is that going to be an open or a closed circle? It's going to be an open. Again, this is saying x is greater than because it's like facing the 3. It wants to eat the 3, so it's going towards the 3. It's greater than. So when we graph that, again, we're going to put our point at 3. Doesn't matter where 3 is. And then we are going to put an open circle there. And it's greater than, so it's going in the positive direction. So again, to write that in interval notation, I'm looking at it from left to right. I'm looking at it, where does it start? It starts at 3. And then it goes on forever in the positive direction to positive infinity. And so the way that we'd write that in interval notation, it starts at 3, goes to infinity, and I look to see. Okay, 3, it's at an open circle, so an open circle means parentheses. Infinity, we always use a parentheses. And that is it in interval notation. So let's keep going. Now we have x is less than or equal to 3. So let's first write that. And so now because we have that or equal to, now it's a closed circle. So when it has that extra line, we have to fill in the circle. And so what this means in comparison to this one, 3, and this one, 3 is not a solution, but every number less than 3 is. In this situation, 3 is a solution in addition to every number less than 3. Okay, so let's graph that. So it's similar to what we've been doing up here. We can put the 3 wherever. It's going to be a closed circle at 3. And it's less than or equal to, so less than is going in the negative direction. And that's my graph. So then to write that in interval notation, I look again from left to right. Where does it start? Well, it starts going in the negative direction forever. So it's going towards negative infinity, and it ends at 3. So from left to right, it starts at negative infinity to 3. Infinities always have a parentheses, and then 3 is a closed circle. So remember, a closed circle is a bracket. So these don't have to match. One can be a parentheses, one can be a bracket. They can both be parentheses, they can both be brackets. So we just look at each part separately. Okay, last one, x is greater than or equal to 3. And so is that an open or a closed circle? And that would be closed. Again, what this is saying is 3 is a solution, and so is every number that's greater than 3. So if we were to graph that, I'm just going to put 3 over here since I ran out of room. So 3, x is greater than 3. It's going to be a closed circle going in the positive direction. So again, we look at it when we're writing it in interval notation, we look at it from left to right. It starts at 3 and goes in the positive direction forever. So we'd write it as 3 comma infinity. 3 is a closed circle. A closed circle is always a bracket. Infinity is always a parentheses. So that is interval notation. Okay, so let's look at some examples. We have x is greater than -2. Now, if it helps you to graph it, I recommend graphing it. To me, I like to graph it because I think it really helps to just visually see it. And you can just do like a really quick sketch of it. So if I were to graph it at -2, is greater than an open circle or a closed circle? It's an open circle. And is greater than going in the positive direction or the negative direction? And greater than is going in the positive direction. So I look at it from left to right. From left to right, it starts at -2 and goes in the positive direction forever. So I just start there. It would be -2 to infinity. -2 is an open circle, so it's a parentheses. Infinity is always a parentheses. And that is my final answer. Okay, so I want you guys to pause me here, and I want you guys to try 2 on your own. So first, just graph 2 on your own. So just graph 2 right now. Okay, so that's what my graph looks like. It's going in the negative direction. It's a closed circle because it's that or equal to. So then I want you guys to try and write that in interval notation. So pause and try this on your own to write it in interval notation. And I got -infinity to 0 because it's going in the negative direction forever, and it goes to 0. Parentheses on the infinity, bracket because of the closed circle on the 0. Okay, so let's look at 3. X is greater than or equal to 4. So again, I'm going to graph it just to help myself to visually see it. I'm going to put my number at 4, and then it's greater than or equal to. So or equal to, remember that means it's a closed circle, and greater than is going in the positive direction. So when I write that in interval notation, I'm looking at it from left to right. It starts at 4, and then it goes in the positive direction forever. So that's going to be 4 comma infinity. And then I look, 4 is a closed circle, so it's a bracket, and it goes infinity is always a parentheses. Okay, so what I want you guys to do on 4 is I want you guys just to start by graphing your problem. So pause me and graph number 4. So your graph should look something like that. So it's going in the negative direction. It's an open circle because it's not or equal to. And then what I want you guys to do from there is write it in interval notation. So in interval notation, it's going in the negative direction forever. So -infinity ends at -7. Parentheses, always on infinity, parentheses on -7 because it's an open circle. Okay, so I want you guys to look at 5, 6, 7, and 8. It's giving you the graphs of those. So it's actually easier than 1 through 4 because we had to kind of use the graph to help us write it in interval notation. So I'm going to start you guys with 5, and then I'm going to go on from that. So we're looking at it, and it's going in the negative direction forever. So we know, okay, that means -infinity, and it ends at -1. So to write that in interval notation, we know it's just -infinity to -1. Parentheses always on the infinity, and it's an open circle, so parentheses on -1. Okay, so pause me here. I want you guys to try 6, 7, and 8. So try all 4 or all 3 on your own. So pause me at this point, try those 3, and then come back to check your work. Okay, number 6 is -4 to infinity. Starts with a bracket because it's a closed circle. Parentheses always on infinity. Number 7 is 0 to infinity. It's a parentheses because it's an open circle, parentheses always on infinity. And last one, we have negative infinity to 2 with a bracket on 2 because it's a closed circle. Okay, so that's interval notation. What we are going to hop into now is actually solving the inequalities. Solving inequalities is really similar to solving equations. There's only real one big difference, and that one big difference is the golden rule of inequalities. So when you are multiplying or dividing both sides, super, super important that both sides is key here, of an inequality by a negative number, you must flip the inequality symbol. And so if it's greater than and you're dividing both sides by a negative, you'd make it less than. If it was greater than or equal to, then you'd make it less than or equal to. So solving an inequality is just like solving a multi-step equation. First step is to distribute. So there are no parentheses left in the inequality. Then we want to combine like terms on each side of the inequality. After we've done that, we move the variables to one side of the inequality. Then we move the constants to the other side of the inequality. Then we solve for the variable using inverse operations. And I just pulled all of these from the same exact setup as our notes in multi-step equations. So it's the same same steps as we did in solving multi-step equations. So then we want to check the order of the inequality. The order of the inequality, before you write it in interval notation and before you graph it, should be the variable, then the symbol, the inequality symbol, and then the constant or the number by itself. So for example, it would be, you always want it to be x, the x to come first, then the symbol greater than or equal to, and then the number 3. So then we graph the inequality, and we ask ourselves, is it an open or closed circle? Remember, an open circle, we use when it's less than or equal to, or less than or greater than. And then a closed circle is less than or equal to and greater than or equal to. And then we draw our arrow in the appropriate direction. So if it's going in the negative direction, it's less than or equal to. If it's going in the positive direction, it's greater than or equal to. And then we always want to write our solution in interval notation. Okay, let's do our first example. So first step, I'm just going to follow my steps up here. So my first step is to distribute. So there are no parentheses in the inequality. Now, just like I did with a multi-step equation, in a multi-step inequality, you can draw the line down where the inequality is too. So if that helps you, then do that. So first thing I'm going to do is distribute my 4 to x and 3. Okay, so that becomes 4x plus 12 is greater than negative 24. Okay, so we distributed. Now we're going to combine like terms on each side of the inequality. Now, 4x plus 12, nothing can be combined, and negative 24, nothing else on that side. So then we want to move my variables to one side of the inequality. Well, my variable is only here, so we don't have to worry about anything. So now I just need to move my constants to the other side of the inequality. So I have my variable here, which is what side I want it on. So I'm going to move this positive 12 to the other side. Remember, it's the opposite operation. So if this is a positive 12, we need to subtract 12 from both sides of my inequality. The 4x comes down. 12 minus 12 cancels, is greater than negative 24 minus 12 is negative 36. Last step with solving, solve for the variable using inverse operations. So it's 4 times x. To get x by itself, we want to divide both sides by 4. And I get x is greater than negative 36 divided by 4 is negative 9. Okay, so from there, we're going to graph the inequality. So for greater than, is that an open or a closed circle? I'm just going to put my negative 9 anywhere. And so greater than is an open circle. So I'm going to put an open circle here. And then is greater than going in the positive direction or the negative direction? And it's going in the positive direction. So to write that in interval notation, we're looking at it from left to right. So it's going negative 9 to positive infinity. Negative 9 is in parentheses because it's an open circle. Infinity is always a parentheses. And that is the answer that you would want to put in Go Formative when you guys are doing your classwork. Okay, let's look at 2. We're going to still do 2 together, and then I'm going to let you guys try some of these on your own. Okay, so first step, we want to distribute, so there are no parentheses left in the inequality. Again, if you guys need to write that line down the middle, you can. So I'm looking at what number's on the outside of the parentheses, and it's negative 3. So that negative 3 is going to distribute to the x and the 2. So what comes down? X comes down. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x, and negative 3 times 2 is negative 6, is greater than 4. Okay, then I want to combine like terms on like either side of the inequality. So I can combine x and minus 3x. Those are like terms. And so x minus 3x is negative 2x. Minus 6 comes down, greater than 4. And now I'm at a similar problem that I was up here. I want to undo anything that's being added or subtracted. So we have a minus 6. So to undo that, I'm going to add 6 to both sides. I bring down my negative 2x. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0, greater than 10. And then to get x by itself, I'm dividing both sides by a negative 2. But wait, I'm dividing both sides by a negative number. When I divide both sides by a negative number, what do I need to do? Well, when multiplying or dividing both sides of an inequality by a negative number, you must flip the inequality symbol. So what happens is this becomes x. Now it flips to be less than 10 divided by negative 2 is negative 5. So that only happens when we divide or multiply both sides by a negative number. So let's make sure we note that. So we divided both sides by a negative 2. Which means we flip the inequality symbol. So just like we did here, it was originally greater than, and we flipped it to less than. So then we graph. So x is less than negative 5, so I'm just going to put negative 5 on my graph. Is less than a closed or open circle. It's an open circle. Less than, is that going in the positive or the negative direction? It's going in the negative. And so to write that in interval notation, we're looking at it from left to right. It's going in the negative direction forever. So it's negative infinity, ends at negative 5. Infinity is always a parentheses. -5 is an open circle, so it's a parentheses. Okay, let's move on to our next couple of problems here. I know we have a lot of examples, but I wanted to make sure you guys saw everything. Okay, so what I wanted you guys to do, I want you guys to just start with number 3, and I want you guys to try the first step on your own. So just try your first step. Look at the, steps on the last page and try this example on your own. Okay, so your first step should have been just to distribute that, I was trying to focus it, that -2 to the x and the -4. So I got 7x minus 2x plus 8 is less than or equal to -2. So then from there, I want you guys to do the next step. So the next step is just to combine like terms. So I combined 7x minus 2x to get me 5x. And then do your next step from there. So I moved my constants to the other side of the inequality. And then I'm going to do my last step to solve. So my final answer I got was x is less than or equal to -2. So I want you guys from there to graph that inequality. So I got my graph to be a closed circle because of that or equal to. It's going in the negative direction. Now I want you guys to write it in interval notation. So write it in interval notation. So I got -infinity to -2. Remember, because it's a closed circle, we use a bracket. And with parentheses, with infinity symbols, we always use parentheses. Okay, so let's go on to 4. Remember, if you guys have any questions with any of the problems, especially the ones where I'm having you guys try them on your own, bring them to class. We can go over them in class as a group. Okay, number 4, I want you guys to try this one all on your own. So I want you guys to pause me here. I want you guys to try every single problem or every single step on your own, and then see if you get to the inequality on your own. So don't graph it yet. Don't get the interval notation yet. Just pause me here and try the entire problem on your own. First step, I distributed. I then combined my like terms. I moved my constants to the other side of the equation. Be careful with the next step. And I got x is greater than or equal to 4. Now, the reason I said to be careful with the next step is because I divided both sides by a negative number. Remember, when I divide both sides by a negative number, we need to flip the inequality symbol. Okay, so now that you got the inequality, x is greater than 4, I want you guys to graph that one and then write it in interval notation. Okay, so make sure you guys have the same exact answer as me. Your inequality, your interval notation is correct, your graph is correct, everything looks just like mine. Okay, let's look at 5. And if you guys need to take a break during this, then pause me, take a break. That's the beauty of a video. You guys can take a break when you need to, but we are almost done. We have 3 more problems. Okay, I'm going to first start with a line. I look to see, are there any parentheses? And there aren't. So I want to then combine like terms. Combining like terms, no like terms on the left, no like terms on the right. So then I want to move my variables to the other side of the inequality. I like to always move my variables to the left side. So I'm going to move this -2x to the other side. Because it's -2x, I'm going to add 2x to both sides. 6x plus 2x is 8x. Bring down that plus 1 is less than 9. And then from there, I just solve for x. So I undo anything that's being added or subtracted. So I subtract 1 from both sides. 8x is less than 9 minus 1, which is 8. And then get x by itself. So I'm going to divide both sides by 8. And I get x is less than 1. So I graph that. Less than, is that an open or a closed circle? That's an open. I should put the 1 first. So it's an open circle. And then less than, is that going in the positive or negative direction? And that's going in the negative. So to write that in interval notation, I'm looking at it from left to right. It's going in the negative direction forever. So it starts at negative infinity, and then it ends at 1. Always a parentheses on infinity. It's an open circle, so parentheses on 1. Okay, let's move on to 6. So this is one of our multi-step ones. So first thing I want to do, I'm still going to follow my steps. Nothing is changing. I am still going through and following this same order of steps. I'm going to first distribute. So I actually have to distribute on both sides. So I have to distribute the -3 to the x and the 6, and I have to distribute, remember that's a -1 to the x and the -7. So 5x minus 3x minus 18 is greater than or equal to, the 8 comes down, and then -x plus 7, because -1 times -7 is +7. Okay, from there, again, next step, combine like terms. Okay, I look on my left side. I can combine 5x minus 3x to get me 2x. And then minus 18 comes down. And then I can combine 8 and 7. And that negative x is going to come down. And 8 plus 7 is 15. So from there, what I want to do is I want to get my variables on one side of the equation. Like I said before, I always prefer to get my variables on the left-hand side. So I'm going to move this -x to the left-hand side. Because this is a negative, I'm going to add x to both sides. So 2x plus x is 3x. Bring down that minus 18, greater than or equal to, that cancels, and then bring down the 15. Okay, from there, what I want you guys to do is finish this problem. So finish this problem on your own, get the inequality by itself, or get XL by itself. So I moved the 18 to the other side of the equation, and then I divided both sides by 3 to get x is greater than or equal to 11. So now that we've gotten our interval or inequality, I want you guys to graph it and then write it in interval notation. So pause and finish this problem. Okay. So it was greater than or equal to, so it was a closed circle when I graphed it, going in the positive direction because of the greater than. It's a bracket because it's closed, 11 to positive infinity, always a parentheses on infinity. Okay, last problem. So what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to do the first step on your own. So do the first step on your own. So first step was to distribute. I distributed the -3 to x and 2 to get -3x minus 6. Okay, continue on, do the next step. So my next step was to combine like terms. Be careful because -3x minus 3x isn't 0. -3x minus 3x is -6x, and then that minus 6 comes down. Okay, continue on and do the next step. So I moved my variables to the left side of the inequality, and I got -8x minus 6 is less than 18. Do your next step. I got -8x is less than 24 because I moved my constants to the other side of the inequality symbol. My last step, remember my last step is to get x by itself. To get x by itself, I need to divide both sides by a -8. When I am dividing both sides by a negative number, I need to flip the inequality symbol. So it's going to be x is greater than now. 24 divided by -8 is -3. And that is my final answer. So then graph that and write it in interval notation on your own. So my graph, open circle because it's not or equal to. And I didn't put a negative. It's going in the positive direction because it's greater than. And then interval notation is -3 to positive infinity. -3 has a parentheses because it's an open circle. Infinity always has a parentheses. And that does it for our inequality notes. That was kind of a lot in one sitting, but inequalities are really similar to equations. So that is the beauty of it. The biggest thing is remember, When you divide or multiply both sides by a negative number, you have to flip the inequality symbol. So that's it. We will go over questions in class. Have a great day, and I will see you guys soon.